Welcome to today's podcast episode on MonicaAnn. I'm your host, MonicaAnn. If you have not done so, hit that subscribe button so you never miss a podcast episode. Thank you so much for reaching out to me and wanting to share your testimony. This is Guiseppe Mandell, and you've told your testimony on all the news stations, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. It's story pretty public.
Yes, very cool. And I'm just so grateful that you reached out. You wanted to share your testimony, which I think is such a beautiful thing when people are willing to share such a personal part of themselves to help other people. So thank you so much. I
No,
appreciate that. And
thank you for having me.
if
And
you
thank
want to
you
go
for
ahead and if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us who you are and what you do.
So my name's Giuseppe Mandell, obviously. I'm the Director of Business Development for Optima Healing and Recovery in Las Vegas, Nevada. And I'm also a person in long-term recovery. And so what that means is I haven't used a drink or mind-altering substance in a number of years. So July 5th, 2019 is my last stint, where all I had left was a hospital gown. And if you could
Oh,
picture
wow.
like that crazy homeless dude that's talking to the light poles, and I seen a guy driving down to work today that was in the middle of the street yelling at cars and just out of his mind. And that was me 6 years ago. Before that, I was, I was a good kid. I never got a detention for having my shirt untucked in high school. I went to St. Anne's at Bishop Gorman High School out here. I was an all-state athlete. Grew up. Me and my brother, my dad raised us on his own. Just through private school. So I was a good kid, and then just got strung out on pain pills due to injury. And then true product of the opioid epidemic, and then ended up in and out of treatment several times to eventually putting a needle in my arm.
Oh,
And
wow.
heroin, and then ended up homeless for a while. And like by the grace of God and a lot of help, I couldn't live or I couldn't die. I was just kind of existing. And I tried everything other than surrendering to God, which I always believed in God. I grew up with a very extensive Catholic education. Uh, but I didn't think I was worthy of God's grace. Even though I look back at my story and there's so many different highlights of when he was there the entire time. So once I finally surrendered, and I'm talking all the way from your $100,000 treatment centers to eventually down to where no hospital wanted to see me. We call them frequent flyers out here, where they're like, "Oh, dude, that dude with the sneaky feet, he's back again. He's never going to get it." And so now in recovery, I tried everything to get well. I even tried joining the traveling circus. I was homeless in Salt Lake City, Utah, and circus came to the camp, and I'm like, dude, I'll try the traveling circus. They're gonna end up back in Vegas. I'll just do that. And it lasted like 3 weeks. Not carnies. This is an actual circus, three-ring circus, where like those people aren't doing drugs, drinking, or anything. It's like all dangerous acts and stuff. And so that didn't work. Every treatment center, everything, until I finally surrendered. Sober in a house of 25 men, women, and children, which was a nightmare. But I just kept praying every night, doing my thing, going to work, and just ended up working my way all the way up. Unfortunately, my brother was one of the big instrumentals that helped get me sober, with a lot of different friends, and he passed away. I think it's coming up on 4 years now, to fentanyl. He had a small relapse, and he died of fentanyl, which, if you look at a lot of my work, is with fentanyl awareness and opiate awareness. And that was laced in the cocaine. And he was a huge abstaining member of society. So then I dedicated my life to helping others. I started from the ground up as a tech at low-level treatment center, all the way down to an adolescent program, to a program director, to an executive director, to business development at another large company, to now over here at Optima. And I like to say my
Wow.
phone's on 24/7, because I answer my drug dealer 24/7. I can answer a patient or a nurse or somebody in need, family member 24/7. And it's cool. We were just talking about it before we got here. We got and now like the group's going, and they go to a mega church out here called Central, which is this huge church. The pastor's awesome. It's a great church. And our little group of guys is getting bigger and bigger, amongst the huge pool of guys that are newly getting sober, coming. And so now we got like a whole row of the, I don't know, 10,000 people that attend every Sunday.
Wow. Wow. You're definitely very involved in the community. And I'd say that you found your calling, and through that, obviously you found it through pain, essentially, right?
Yeah, and it's funny, we've been talking about in this last chapter at service on Sundays. We've been on the story of Joseph in Genesis. It's I'm not saying a similar story, but that helps when the times get tough, even today, because I still struggle today. I can look like I got everything together, everything is going great on the outside in these interviews, but we all struggle all the way from the guy that's first sober to me coming up on 6 years. I mean, we all struggle in different ways. I mean, early on it was, man, I wonder if I can get a pack of cigarettes or where's my next rent coming for things. Now it's just bigger issues. You know what I mean? And we all struggle on different days and we all help each other out, whether you're 3 days sober or you're 25 years sober. The camaraderie and trusting in God and cleaning house and helping others. We all struggle on different days and we all have each other to help each other out.
Yeah, I'm glad that, you found that community of support for yourself, and that's beautiful. And I just wanted to touch on a couple things. You said that you went to Bishop Gorman. My 4
I
children
did.
went to Bishop Gorman.
Oh, you don't look like you're old enough to have 4 kids that went through high school.
Oh, I do. They're all adults now, and I'm actually having my first 2 grandbabies.
Wow.
My first is due in August, and my second is due in November. Yeah.
Congratulations. When did
Thank
they
you.
graduate?
Oh gosh, I forget their years. Can't math right now on the spot, but they're 2 of them are 23 years old. They're not twins,
Okay.
but 2 are 23. I've got a 21-year-old this month, and then a 19-year-old.
Oh, wow. Well, God
Yeah,
bless you. You
yeah.
you were able to put them through probably the best education in the United States for high schools.
Yes, yes, they were fantastic kids, and I'm so proud of them, and I'm glad that they had the opportunity to have that education for sure. And then a couple of other things that really stood out from your testimony was that you said that your brother was really like the catalyst for you to get involved, right? And that was his death. I think, we all have seen the commercials or seen the ads on the side of the freeway about fentanyl, but I think it's one of those things where people think it's not going to happen to me. It's so rare, but I personally have had several people that I know that have died from overdose. Do you know the statistics on that off the top of your head of how
So
many
they're ever
people
changing, and
are?
yes, yes, I do know a lot of them, right? So it's the number one cause of death, 18 to 45, and in the United States, like number one cause of death for young adults, and that's by a landslide. Like the margins aren't even close. And ironically, most of the people, and I talk about this a lot on the news, is relates to stigma. Is most of the people are not homeless. And so when you'll see a news story or you'll see something, you'll see like the B-roll of somebody that's kind of nodding out homeless on the streets. But no, a lot of them are our kids that went to Gorman. I mean, God, ironically, and I test going to Gorman to a lot of the credit to my sobriety as well, because I got a lot of friends that I'm still in touch with from kindergarten all the way through high school that are either in recovery and on I can't, more than 10 I've lost to within the 4 year span that I was on school to dying. Now, not all to opiates, but yeah, the numbers are pretty staggering, and you're way more likely to die at home. And it doesn't discriminate. It doesn't care who you vote for. It doesn't care who you're sleeping with. It doesn't care what you choose to identify as, if you're a Christian, a Muslim, or if you're an atheist. I mean, it literally has no discrimination. It's just like cancer, but more deadly, believe it or not.
Wow, that is crazy. I did not know that it was the number one cause of death between those age range. That is
45.
mind blowing to me. I had no idea. So
And it's
thank
not even
you so
close.
much.
It's not even, I mean, by a landslide, it's number one cause of death. I mean, it's a true epidemic, and no one thinks that it's not going to arrive at your house, but until it does. And the thing is, and so I work in this field, and I always stress this when I speak or I do what we call in services, where we talk to hospital staff and stuff. Is I know that we're always dealing with patients, but don't be afraid to reach out for yourself or a family member too. And one of the things when I got into this work, I used to be in sales. And so I do these big presentations at these networking events. And then I would do my volunteer work as a recovery coach as well. Don't you know, nobody wanted to talk to me about my sales product. Everybody wanted to pull me aside on the side and say, hey, listen, I wanted to talk to you about this, but I didn't want to say it out loud. And it's true. I mean, you wouldn't believe I've helped people all the way from billionaires all the way down to somebody on the street and everybody in between. I mean, doctors, attorneys, I mean, you name it, athletes, professional athletes, you name it. And it doesn't discriminate, either themselves or their kids or their parents. I know that age range stops at 45, but there's still a lot of decibel over that as well.
Wow. Wow. That is,
It was kind of the first.
I'm shocked. I'm shocked with the statistic. I really am.
I mean, think when your kids
Wow.
went to school, I guarantee you your kids have lost some of their friends that they went to school with.
To be honest, I have not even had the conversation with them to ask. And, I, over the next meal that I have with my kids, I will certainly ask the question because I am curious. It's heartbreaking. I can't imagine losing a child, and especially that way when it's something that can be prevented. So I think that's the most, it's not like a car accident, right? Like this is something that people have control over. And I think that that's the most heartbreaking thing. So, and I personally, I try, I'm very open about this, but I did smoke weed like in the 8th grade, once my sophomore year and once as an adult. And I was scared straight, man. I will never touch a drug. So, and I don't drink that heavily. So I personally cannot relate to somebody who is an addict. So I guess, can you elaborate a little more on that? Like, can you explain your frame of mind when you were using?
So, and I do this a lot when I speak. I mean, if you look at my track record growing up, right, I was an athlete, right? And so what athletes, it teaches you is, you push through the pain. With each bit of pain, you can will it, you can work harder, and you can overcome it. You can pretty much accomplish anything, right? Which I've done throughout my career. So like you put me in the ring with somebody, right? Like, I mean, I'll figure out a way and outsmart it and figure out a way to do it, or I'll keep going until I can't get up anymore. Same with football, same with any type of work. When it comes to any type of mind altering substance, for whatever reason, it's a disease, and it's like the phenomenon of craving, we call it, right? It's a chemical imbalance. You just can't. And I can't tell you, I have two beautiful kids, right? There's my daughter who just graduated high school, and then my son that's 16 now. When they were younger, when I was still out there, the times where I eventually ended up homeless, I can't remember every time I panhandled with a sign. If I would make $40 by the grace of God, I had every intention of going, getting a bus ticket, coming back home to Vegas, and getting sober. I just couldn't make it, and I couldn't understand why. And as soon as I would shoot up to get well or something, I would cry and be like, "Why am I doing this? Why can't I just get on that bus, get sober?" And the best answer an addict can give you when you're talking to them is, "I don't know why." Because it's truth. You just don't know why. You can't explain it. You can be so successful, and they've done a lot of studies on this, in everything else in life, actually achieve a lot more than your average person if you have this kind of genetic defect or this disease. On the flip side, though, is if you put any mind altering substance, the results in the opposite direction are way worse. We tragically fall all the way down, and we're not much different than any normal human, not much different than yourself. I mean, I'm sure you struggle with different things in life. I'm sure there's times you struggle with your faith and stuff. The difference is we pick up a drink or a drug where if you can go and have a glass of wine or something and relax and unwind you, for us, it hits that kind of chemical imbalance where it triggers and we can't stop. And that's the difference is we have to find different alternatives. And the big thing that we teach, like say at Optima, is a biopsychosocial, which is the science portion, but we've also implemented the spiritual side too, because that's a very important part. Without God and putting that first, I couldn't survive. So I have to rely on God. And then, in short, I guess, after all that long ramble, you don't know why, right? I'm sure there's a scientific measure and thing for it, but you don't know why. It is a disease, just like cancer. I mean, or diabetes. It's very similar. Like why a diabetic has to take insulin, right? And they can't eat certain things. Well, our chemical is in the brain, which is you can't stop. And once you start, and I don't care who you are. I mean, you've got presidents that are in recovery. I don't know. Did you know which president was in recovery?
I did not.
George W. Bush was sober for many years. RFK Jr. right now he is sober. So like I said, it doesn't discriminate. I don't want to scare you, but I've helped anesthesiologists get sober who were couldn't stop using substances and still putting people under. So I mean, it doesn't discriminate. It doesn't care if it's your bank teller. It doesn't care if it's your anesthesiologist. It doesn't care if it's somebody that grew up in a terrible environment. It goes to that thing is why there's an old story where You had two brothers and they grew up in a terrible environment. One succeeded and the other didn't. Why is that? They grew up in the same environment. One became a drug addict, one never touched it. And there's not really an answer for it. They're still trying to figure out answers for it. And I'm sure there's a lot of scientific opinions on it, one way or the other. But the fact is, everyone's got an opinion and there is one solution.
Yeah. Yeah. I was born into a family that had a lot of addiction issues. A lot of people in and out of, rehabs or jail. And I am, there are few of us in my family who just were different, and like I said, I think mine too was I had a lot of scared straight situations, but there was something in me that recognized that it was not the path that I wanted to take.
Right.
And I think too, it really helped me because I moved straight out of high school. I moved to first Tahoe and then Las Vegas, and I was introduced to a completely different way of living as well.
Mhm.
And I gravitated towards that, and also God. I raised my kids in the church, and I started going to church very young with neighbors, and that's how I got introduced to it. So I'm very grateful for those circumstances in my life that I do feel helped me. And I had children with an addict. And had I not got pregnant so young, I don't know if I would have taken that path. So I always, I was just having the conversation this weekend with my kids. I was like, I was young. I was 18 when I got pregnant with my daughter. I was 21 when I had my son, and I was already a single mom. And I think that that actually helped me to make sure that I stayed grounded because I was the only person that could care for them.
Right.
So I look at that as such a blessing, but I don't know if it would have happened any differently if that's the path that I would have taken. So I'm grateful for all of that. And I definitely have been hurt by people that were users. And, that was difficult for me to wrap my head around because, again, I'm not an addict. So I couldn't really relate to it. So I'm like, well, why are they doing what they're doing? And how did your family feel about this? Like your parents, like as you were going through that, how did that affect them when you were using? Did you ever even consider their feelings, or was it just an internal battle purely?
Oh, God. Well, number one, me and my brother, we put my dad through hell. Right. And I mean, my brother, he was bad. He graduated the serious offenders program, which is a 3 DUI court program where you either do 1 to 5 years or you graduate. He did, and then ended up working his way up in the treatment field and helping 1,000 people. I was a late bloomer because mine started with prescription narcotics due to an injury. And so, yeah, you don't want to do it. In some ways, the family suffers more than we do, right? Because we're non-existent. But absolutely, as a matter of fact, like in my upper days, right, when I was still driving, I was still on massive amounts of prescription narcotics, and I was getting in an argument with my brother. I didn't want to be messed up anymore. I didn't. And so I get in a big argument with my brother. And so my impulsive thought was my car had broke down on the side of the road. And I was like, well, screw it, man. I'm just going to end it. And I hung up the phone and I walked into traffic. I walked in front of a semi, and I don't know where, but a compact car came out of nowhere and hit me instead. And I flew about, I don't know, 100 feet, came out of my shoes, and my life was so unmanageable. I couldn't even do that right because I survived, obviously. And then their insurance sued me for the $7,000 damage to her car. So, like by the grace of God, and that lady was a nurse, thank God, and that poor lady. But that gives you an example of like, yeah, I can only speak for myself. I can't speak for other people. But you get to that point where you're just existing. You're not living. You can't die. You try to die, and you don't want to put your family through any more of it. So, you try to end it. That doesn't work. You go in and out of treatment. You can't understand why. And like I said, even towards the end when I was panhandling, I'd have the money and I'd have every intent to want to go in, but I had to get well first. And then once you get well, then you're crying, thinking like, why do I keep doing this? Why? I've got every reason to stop. I've got a good family, and they're all there to help me if I'm willing and want the help.
Yeah.
But there's not, and friends. I mean, I got a strong network of all my friends from Gorman that are all still close friends to this day. I had one guy that was an EMT, and we had the same kind of tattoos, and that's the only way he recognized me, and helped save my life that time. I just can't imagine why. And you do think about that every time, and you do want to. You just can't figure out how, and
Oh,
it kills you inside.
so you're saying that when you jumped in front of the car, the responding EMT, you knew him from Gorman?
No, this is a whole different time. I've got so many different
Got it.
stories of times trying to get clean. This was just another time where my heart rate, I was mixing meth and heroin at the time, and my heart rate was like, should have killed me. And, they just responded to, I don't know, one of my, you know, freaking out states where, who knows what I was saying or where I was at. And I wouldn't get in the car with the fire department because I was paranoid. And then he calmed me down, and ironically, he's sober as well. And I had another buddies of mine that went and found me on the streets, and they drove me all the way up to Reno, right outside Reno, to go to a rehab, only for me to leave 3 days later with no shoes on. And then hitchhike with this deadhead who thought it'd be a good idea to get sober, driving back down to Vegas. And I mean, you know how that went.
Yeah.
Neither one of us ended up getting sober. I ended up getting airlifted to Salt Lake City, Utah, because again, my heart rate was through the roof, and so they airlifted me in a helicopter. And then I figured, well, dude, I can't. I'm no good to my family. I'm no good to myself, and this is obviously a little bit drug induced as well. So I figured I'm just going to be like Saint Francis, and I'm going to walk around, do a little bit of drugs, live off of nothing in Salt Lake City, and bring God to the Mormon people of Utah. Is what I
Oh,
thought. But try to stay away from my parents because I didn't want to hurt them anymore. I didn't want to hurt my kids. I wanted to get better. I just couldn't. And so, but by the grace of God, like I believe He keeps you alive for a purpose.
yeah.
You got little God shots throughout all those stories. It could keep me. My dad had to cut me off, and he went to Al-Anon, and obviously with the instructions of my brother and stuff, and they would have those things of, I love you. I'm not going to let you talk to that way. I can't help you unless you want to go to treatment, and they would help if I was willing to do that. And the ironic thing is, my mom was a alcoholic, right? They got divorced from my dad when I was two. And she's obviously now she's sober now, but severe paranoid schizophrenic from all the drugs back in the 80s. And so, and I know it helped me give grace to her after all those years because I could understand, like, she probably wanted to be there, but just couldn't. So now granted, there are probably people who don't care also. Right. But
Mhm.
I think the vast majority of people definitely do care, and they just can't figure out how to stop.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
if there's a pulse, there's a chance. I always say that. Some people get it on their first go around. Some people like me, it takes 17 before we finally get it. When
Yeah.
the cool thing is, I mean, as long as you're there but not enable, and there's a difference between enabling and helping, right? Enabling is like, I'm going to continue to fill up your gas tank. I'm going to continue to let you stay in the house, even though you're using, right? Or
Mhm.
helping is like, hey, if you're ready and you're sober or you're willing to make those steps, I'll help you a little bit on the way. Like I'll give you a hand up, like maybe pay for your first month of sober living, or I'll get you some groceries to your sober living, but you can't come home. That's the difference. And that's hard for, people like yourself or other friends, family, parents. It's hard to understand because in a way, we're numbing it out, right? And we're feeling it when we're coming back, but you guys have to deal with it and watch. It's like watching somebody slowly die from cancer. It's the
Yeah.
same thing, and there's nothing you can do.
Yeah,
So,
I've had to cut a lot of people off. Friends that I grew up with, a lot of them, I grew up in Orange County, California, and, a lot of people became addicts. And like I said, even my family. And it absolutely was such a hard thing for me to realize that I couldn't enable and that I also could no longer subject myself to environments like that. And I had to completely remove myself. And that was, it was definitely difficult, because I want to believe that everybody can do better. But then I did realize that I was part of the problem. And I, like you said, I couldn't provide that free place for them to stay anymore because with that came all of the chaos. Right. And it's like, okay, the madness needs to end and I need to protect my children.
yeah,
So it was definitely a difficult decision. And like you said, even, for somebody like me, I wholeheartedly believe, and I saw it with my own stepfather, that people can change. And, the last 3 years of his life, I got to know the most beautiful person. And through those last 3 years or so, he was able to affect a lot of people's lives through the Narcotics Anonymous.
yeah,
And there was like 200 people at his service, and a lot of them were young kids, that were users, that he was able to touch their lives. And I'm just so grateful that I got to see that. And I'm a huge believer that people can change. So I love that. And it's heartbreaking to see somebody that you love and you see like this perfect God's creation, right? And you're like, why are you doing this to yourself? Why do you hate yourself? Why do you have like that lack of love for yourself in your heart? And it's heartbreaking. And I can't imagine being your dad, and watching both of his boys go through this. And ultimately your brother lost his life to it. I can't even imagine what he went through. And so what specifically do you recommend for, family members that are watching their loved one go through it?
Number one, you can't do it alone, right? And there are a lot of people out there to help you. I'm never one to tell somebody, oh, you have to cut them off and stuff, especially with fentanyl out there, because I'm not going to be the one to say kick them out of the house and then they go use and
Yeah.
die, right? Because that happens. And
Yeah.
there's no right or wrong answer other than knowing that there are services and people out there to help. There are groups out there because for parents, I mean, it's a family disease, 100%. And even like you said, the chaos and stuff, you get addicted to that chaos and you get addicted to being the caretaker and to always being
Yeah.
there to help. That's where you reach out to like a professional or a coach or something, somebody like myself, or there's a lot of us out there, and
Yeah.
um, and then help us guide you into doing the right thing. And groups like Al-Anon or Nar-Anon are huge. Those are also huge groups as well. Individual therapy, and I mean, there's no right or wrong answer. A lot of
So,
prayer.
yeah. And
I
how
believe it works.
absolutely. And how did you ultimately mend the relationship with your children? What did that look like, if you don't mind asking or answering that?
So the good news is my kids were pretty young during it. Now my daughter probably remembers a lot more than my son does, and that was just doing the deal. I mean, and eventually, I have to keep the traditions in the fellowship that I chose. But there's a process that we go through that allows that to happen when you're ready. Right? It's a 12-step process,
Mhm.
along with the help of family therapy and a couple other things. That help. And it's still always a work in progress. I mean, you've got kids, it's still always a work in progress, and that's just by doing the next right thing, and trying to be the example and knowing that, you go through that process, you make that amends, and you don't shut the door on it, but you can't dwell in it either. You just got to one step at a time, and there'll be times where like, yeah, nobody wants to talk to you, and some of those amends don't work, but over time, healing does happen. And it's not just words. It's a program of action. As myself, I had to put a lot of action and work into it. And now that you look back, early on, it seemed like a lot of work. But now that I look back, I mean, the work was relatively minimal compared to the damage that I've done. Where a relatively minimal amount of work allows the healing process to happen. Where it took a lot more work to stay out there drinking and using. And
Yeah.
just have to come to that realization. So it happened, and it's a process, but believe it or not, it can be a relatively quick process.
Yeah.
The quicker you dive in, your family loves you, most of it. Well, at least mine did, right? So they wanted what's best, cautious, but wanted what was best. And just like anything, it's time. And I always tell people, like when they're going in somewhere for 90 days or something, like, dude, it's a blip in the radar. Like I promise, it's a blip in the radar. You'll look back and that'll be like the littlest of your memories, then healing does happen. And then don't get me wrong, life's still not perfect. I never want to pretend or give false hope that life is perfect. And life still hits. I mean, in my
Yeah.
6 years of sobriety, I've lost two siblings. I went through a pandemic, went through major career changes. So life still hits you. You just, you get a little stronger and a little bit more tools to deal with it so that you can handle it without picking up a drink or using and you can be there. I look back and it's like my brother's death that allowed me to get in this work and his death saves thousands of lives today is the way I look at it with his story. Right. So it's a way to
Yeah.
turn that grief around. My story, all the bad stuff that's happened or that I've done, that allows me to relate to somebody else now, and it uses it as a tool to help more people. And so, That's how we do it, and life's still challenging, right? We all still go through.
Yeah.
We all through go through our ways, but with each challenging thing, it gives you a way to showcase how you can trust God, get through it, and keep a clean
Yeah.
house, even when you mistake, and know that you're not perfect.
So, what are the steps that you take to prevent yourself from going back to using?
Well, your number one step is I'd like to say this always. Once you've gone through the process, and you have to learn that process in order to do like what I maintain on a daily basis
Mhm.
now, right? Which is first you got to admit you're a problem, you have a problem, and that your life is unmanageable. Then you kind of trust that there may or may not be something more powerful than you, right? Even if you're not all the way there yet, that can restore your sanity. Then the tough one is to turning your will over to that. Then you make a list of all your anger, okay, and all your resentments. Then you go make an amends to them. Or you talk about it with somebody else. They teach you how to look at your part of it. Then you ask God for a little bit of help with moving some of your character defects. Then you go out and you make lists of all the amends you made, which for me, it'll be a lifetime. And then you start making those amends. And then after that, it's maintenance. So it's trusting God, okay, cleaning house. Obviously, I'm going to screw up daily, right? None of us are going to live a perfect life. There's going to be things that I do wrong. Daily basis, I need to either make an amends for that, look at my part in it, not look at their part, and then helping others, right? Helping others maintain recovery, and that's basically so. My normal routine now is, other than the work I do, is a conversation with God every morning. First thing I do, right? At night, I kind of go through my day and I make sure, hey, do I owe an amends? Is there somebody I need to talk to? Is there something? Sometimes that could take me a week if I'm a little angry. Um, but I know that through that process, I need to do that to maintain my sobriety, and then going out and helping others. And then that doesn't just have to be people in recovery. That could be people struggling with anything, right? That could be a lady who is $10 short of her groceries behind me. And so you pick up the whole bill instead. Or just as simple as making the cashier smile. If they got a guy that was just a jerk to her, and now she's being a jerk back, and now I know she's crappy with me. If I can
Mhm.
just make her smile and say, thank you, you're doing a good job,
Yeah.
that could make her whole day. Little simple disciplines like that help keep you sober, and or help keep me sober.
Very interesting. And so that's what your program teaches is everything that you just described.
Part of it. So at Optima, it's a very intensive program. So it's early on and it's lifelong. And it's a program where we stick with you life, all right? And it's also mixed with AI and gamification apps and stuff, so that we got to stay cutting edge, especially with the younger generation. And no, it goes and it looks at, we ask, not what's wrong with you, but what's happened to you. And through an IOP, intensive group, intensive therapy, and different things, we help get you there. And then there may be a time where you need to come back to us, right? And it might not be for drinking or using. You could have other issues in life. Hence, where the gamification app and the camaraderie goes, right? So like you can always come back, and you could be dealing with a relationship issue, right? Where you go through a major breakup that hits you out of the blue. Hey, how can you connect and get back there with that? So it's ours is a mix of recovery coaching, individual therapy, and intensive outpatient.
And part of the recovery, are you affected by people who have not forgiven you?
Man, I don't want to jinx this, but I don't know if I've ran into anybody who hasn't yet that I know of.
Okay.
I don't focus on that. I focus on who I need to forgive on a daily basis. And that's not always an easy, simple, but not easy. Right. And so that kind of helps keep me grounded because, we've
I
all
get
wronged somebody in the past. And a lot of people have given me grace and forgiveness over and over again. So, I mean, I try to stay, and I don't do this perfectly. I do this very imperfectly. I try to focus on granting forgiveness. But at the same time, I don't know of anybody that hasn't forgiven me that I know of yet. If
yeah.
anybody's listening or watching and I owe you an amends, you're more than welcome to call me if I haven't found you. I,
Yeah, yeah. That's and definitely that's the way that I would picture, your frame of mind needs to be is focused on what you do have control over. Because
yeah,
ultimately, if you were seeking the forgiveness of other people, you don't have control over that. So that's kind of the answer that I
yeah,
was expecting to hear, but I just
yeah.
wasn't sure because again, I've never been through it. So
Well,
that's so
it,
interesting.
that is what it is. It's what we say is clean house, right? So we can only clean our side of the street. and do
Correct.
what you can, and that takes a daily discipline. Hence the prayer meditation in the morning, the review of my day at night, and that's what I can focus on. And then the rest is in God's hands, which is trusting God,
Yes.
and trust God, clean house, help others.
Yeah. And what are the specific things that you're doing with the churches
With the
and recovery?
churches, so I don't know if I specifically do anything with the churches, right? I can lean somebody to celebrate recovery. I personally attend Central Church and I invite anybody and everybody there, right? Probably 5 people a day, and just lead by example. Right? I never coach or anything or say, well, this is what I do. I mean, you're more than welcome to follow me in doing it if you like. And obviously, I mean, I'm not exclusive to just the churches. You could be an atheist and call for help. You could be whatever, the satanic Bible worshiper. If you're asking me for help, I'm going to offer you the help.
Yeah.
So, and then I do a lot of different volunteer work. I sit on a lot of boards in the community. I obviously always share my faith, but I don't preach it to the part where you have to do it this way. This is the way that I done it, and I do my tithing to the church, obviously. And I do my own tithings of helping others out, maybe a small scholarship here and there to get somebody their first month of sober living, or scholarship in our program once in a while if I feel that they're willing.
Beautiful. Yeah. You said that you're at Central. So I actually got baptized at their sister church, The Crossing.
Oh yeah, 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 yeah. I was
That's where
just
I was.
talking with a gentleman who used to do CR at the Crossing.
Very cool.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Just today, he used to be in the leadership group at the Crossing.
Yeah, I had gone to church for years and I went to a women's tea and a woman there that was one of the leaders, I don't know exactly what her title was there. She just looked at me and she was like, "Do you want to get baptized?" And after all these years of going to church, I finally said yes. I was like, "Let's do it right here, right now." I cried, I did the whole thing, and it was such a beautiful day for me, for
How
sure.
long ago was that?
That was, I have the paper here, but it was either 15 or 16 that I finally did it. And I'm going to be 43 next month. And I started going to church in the third grade. So for a very long time, I had all the questions and all the doubts that everybody else has. That's why I say, you know what, I'm the perfect person to talk to people about Jesus and about my faith because
Mhm.
I was a skeptic. And believe it or not, I actually watched a lot of videos from atheists and then they eventually turned believers.
Yeah.
And that's where I really was. I was looking at it from actually the opposing side, which is very interesting. So I tell people all the time, I'm like, yeah, don't take my word for it. Go do the work yourself, read scripture, go to church, have your relationship with God, pray. That's what I did. Don't follow just because I did. This is something that you have to experience for yourself. So I
Well,
love
in a
that.
way, atheists are the best because they spend so much time trying to disprove that
Mhm.
they end up finding faith by not being able to disprove it.
Exactly. Yeah. So I love sharing that part of my testimony with people. I'm like, I can relate to that.
And so Gorman came in though, the Catholic, because that's Catholic. Were you baptized?
Yes. Okay. So this is kind of my story. Well, I just told you the first part of it. And then I raised my two children as a single mom for years, going to the church. They would go to the camps and everything. So I got married. He was Catholic. His two children were Catholic. And then my children got confirmed Catholic. They started going to St. Viator
Hmm.
and then they graduated there and then went to Gorman. And so then after my divorce, I had been looking into converting, but never took the time to do the RCIA class. And then just last March in West Virginia, I was confirmed Catholic.
Oh wow.
So, yeah, so I finally converted over. But as it's parallel to being Christian. It's a lot of the same things and even some churches that are Christian do, the body and blood of Christ. So
Mhm.
you receive the Eucharist there. So it's very very similar. I think really the biggest difference are the saints, right? And yeah, so saints is like a big deal between Catholic and Christian, but all very much similar. But I enjoy both types of church, and I happen to find a Catholic church that has a fantastic choir. So that's definitely a big difference between most Christian and Catholic churches, but I happen to find one that has a fantastic choir and band. So,
Oh,
but
that's awesome.
yeah, yeah. So, and I tell everybody, I'm like, whatever way that you find Jesus and you find God, do that. I'm not a big person that preaches, one way or another, because I've heard stories on both ends. Some people don't like the Christian church, some people don't like the Catholic church. And I'm like, whatever makes you hear the message and, brings you closer to God, do that. So, yeah, that's where my stance on it.
So still a practicing Catholic.
I am. Yes.
Awesome. That's
Yep,
that's
I go to mass every Sunday, and I thoroughly enjoy the church that I belong to. I actually want to do a separate podcast too, because a lot of people don't like going to the church. So I want to do a separate podcast on that, because a lot of people don't know. When you say I was raised by the church, I giggle. There was a lot of things that I did not learn growing up from my parents.
mhm.
As a single mom, I was introduced to a church. It actually was not the Crossing, though. It was a Calvary Chapel in Green
Yeah.
Valley in
Hmm.
Henderson, and loved that church. Went on a couple of retreats, and they did a single moms group, and I ended up being the only one who signed up. They would watch my kids every Wednesday. They would like watch cartoons in color and whatnot. And I would watch these DVDs, I would do workbooks, and I learned how to budget. I mean, all of these skills that, you ask. A lot of people will say, well, didn't your parents teach you that? And I'm like, no, I moved out and didn't even know how to pump gas. And I was not shown, how to drive a car. So, and I grew up, from a very uneducated, poor family was what I was born into. And so the church actually, you know, I learned all of that through the church. And a lot of people don't know about that about me because I haven't shared it. So I'll be doing a separate podcast on that. So, but I've also been to churches that I didn't like. So again, I can relate to people, but don't let that stop you with your relationship with Jesus, is what I tell everybody. Just find another church.
Well, I think that's awesome, and I think the Catholic Church needs you, and probably needs you to do more of an outreach and a podcast for it. I like to say that I'll always be Catholic. I just don't
Yeah.
practice the sacraments as much anymore. Well, I don't practice the sacraments, right? As far as Holy Communion or confession or whatever. I used to be very involved with the Catholic Church,
Yes.
all the way to meeting archbishops. My family are still very Catholic. I mean, I'll always be Catholic. For me, like I'd love for the Catholic Church to get more into the music and less structure to more appeal to the younger generation.
Yeah. We have concerts every month, actually. The priest at my church, he actually I think he plays the guitar, and he went to college. He was married at one point, and he was like in a band. So it's a very interesting testimony that he has.
I definitely would love to come check out your church one time. And I
Yeah.
think that's the big thing is, I mean, I credit a lot of growing up to some great priests, like so in Nevada here in Vegas, our auxiliary Bishop Gordon, he was one of those priests when I was at St. Anne's where he was just a young priest. And I remember him drinking a beer. I know I'm in recovery now. And I remember
Yeah.
thinking in like fourth grade, I'm like, you can't drink a beer. You're a priest. He's like, no, I can drink a beer. And was just super cool all the way to Father Tom out here, who was the president of Gorman at the time when I went. And
Yeah.
like he was like the coolest priest ever, where you got in trouble or something, he had open door policy, and he was like just like one of the guys, and you could get in and he would talk to you just like a normal dude.
Yeah.
Like
At
super
at
cool priest.
Yeah, at the concerts, at the church that I go to now, they have beer and wine trucks, and
Yeah.
they do oh, yeah, it's a full-blown party. They play all the sports games and everything. He'll make jokes about it. That's what I love is, he's not I don't know how else to describe it. I hope nobody gets offended, but stiff,
Yeah.
and that's what you encounter a lot, at older school Catholic churches. That was my experience
Yeah.
anyways. And so when I met this like real guy, I was like, oh, he's pretty cool. And actually, the priest that confirmed me in West Virginia is also just a normal guy. It's you can have normal conversations with him. And we actually went out and played pool one night and had a blast.
I think that's so important with priests. And I wish they would almost teach that more to the priests coming out. I had this one priest when I first got sober and I went back through my full confession. It's Father Bill. He's passed away now, but coolest priest ever. And I remember I'm waiting in line for confession. I had known him, right? And so I was at the Guardian Angel. So I go, and there's a big line, but I went early to meet him. And so then he calls me over, and, obviously I went by the line, but it was 15 minutes before confession opened. And so when I came out of my confession, one of the guys in line got mad. And so he calls me over and he kind of started yelling. He goes, "We've all been waiting in line, and you shouldn't have cut line, and that's not good, and this and that." And I just came out of confession. I haven't even done my penance yet. So I'm like, all right, just relax. Just say you're right. I apologize and go. And so when Father Bill
You're
came
like,
out.
I need to walk right back into confession.
Well, that's when Father Bill comes out and talks to me, and I tell him about it. He goes, "Well, what you should have done." And I go, "No, what?" He goes, "You should have just knocked him out and they came back to confession." And he was joking, obviously, but
Yeah.
it's the little priest or priests like that came, and I'm still I'm still very grateful for my Catholic upbringing,
Yeah.
and you didn't really realize it until, like, say, when Passion of the Christ came out. And so it's all in subtitles. And it's funny when you're watching, like, you didn't need the subtitles because it was embedded to you since you were a kid. So it's like you already knew everything going on. You didn't even realize you were reading the subtitles. So,
Yeah.
like, that movie's actually helped. Us convert a few people to Catholicism where they just didn't know
Interesting.
and they didn't know much about the story. And so we're like, well, it's a little graphic, but watch it. And then they'd be crying afterwards. And then they would decide to want to go and convert to Catholicism after watching it.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I love watching the interviews of the actors from The Passion of the Christ. And that was directed by Mel Gibson, right?
It was. Who Mel Gibson's interesting.
Yeah.
He's a traditional Catholic, and so I don't know if you know anything about traditional Catholicism, but I don't think they recognize the Pope, and they're the old school, everything in Latin. But if you watch like some of the stories about him making that movie, it's insane. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, he had a really good interview on the Joe Rogan show,
Yes, I just
right?
watched
On
it.
the
That's the one.
podcast.
Yeah,
Yeah.
not that long ago. It was maybe what, 6 months ago.
Yeah. Yeah. It
It
was
was during the
very,
fires. It was during the Malibu fires. I remember.
yeah. Yeah. That was a fantastic interview for sure. And, bless him for taking the time to make a movie about that.
Oh, he's
But
making a sequel.
I didn't realize that. Was that in the interview? I didn't get through the entire thing.
Yes, he's going to make it about the resurrection.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah, another guy who struggled over the years with alcoholism.
Hmm.
And if you're watching anything about Robert Downey Jr., like there's an interview with Robert Downey Jr. That's him give the award to try to give him grace because Mel Gibson, I guess, helped Robert Downey Jr. back in the day, and now
Aw.
in return tried to help him get on the right path.
Yeah, I'm all about that. Life is truly about community, which obviously it says that over and over again in the Bible. I feel like society has definitely lost that. It's very self-serving, but I
Yeah.
feel like we're going back to the community mentality, and I love that. So, yeah, it's beautiful. But I may be relocating back to Las Vegas. I'm currently looking for work out there, so perhaps I'll come join you at church.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what, reach out to me offline, and there's probably no better resource in town to have if you're looking.
Oh, yes. Well, I definitely will reach out to you. I'll send you my resume, and I really appreciate you again just for coming on. And obviously, this is not an easy subject for anybody to share, right? It can be very heavy. And I love, though, that you're also in very good spirits about it, and that you have that you recognize that you do have a purpose, and I think I'm a person that I look at people, I don't want to say broken, but I can't think of another word for it, but people who are struggling, I guess, in life and coping with it, I guess is a better way to describe it. And my heart just hurts because I'm like, no, you do have a purpose. You are loved. And, I want everybody to find that. There's too many people that are taking their own lives and using and overdosing. And it's usually the most kind people too, the ones that are just like so sensitive to the world and wouldn't even hurt a fly, and
Mhm.
it breaks my heart. And I'm like, I don't want to see my friends die anymore. What can we do to help? And I think that's, when you're convicted by the Holy Spirit and that pops into your mind, hey, maybe I should reach out to such and such, do it. For anybody
Yeah,
watching, do it when you are convicted to do so,
yeah,
because there's a reason that popped in your mind. And, to be there for somebody and be so unselfish can make a difference in somebody's life. I was just watching a video of a homeless woman who had completely given up her a hope of everything, and she got on the bus. You may have seen this. I think it went viral. And the bus driver notices that the woman is not wearing shoes, and she goes, "Honey, you don't have any shoes. It's hot out." And she takes her shoes off and gives them to the young girl. And there was an interview that was done after that where she completely changed her life. And she said, that act of kindness just did something to me and made me realize that there are people who do care. And she's like all cleaned up and a completely different person after that.
that's amazing. Yeah,
I
that's,
know.
and
Yeah.
I always preach that. I said those random acts of kindness, they have
Yeah.
like a ripple effect to
Yes.
where, God, say it's just the person that's just being a jerk at work and you don't know what they're going through, right? And you very well could be that person tomorrow. But like if
Yeah.
you just try to brighten their day up for a second, you don't know what could change in their attitude that they have another experience with somebody else who might be suffering and didn't realize it. And then it
Yeah.
creates a ripple effect. There was a McDonald's commercial that did that a long time ago that did it brilliantly if you look it up.
Yeah.
Where,
I'll have to check it out.
yeah,
I was,
randomness
well,
of
I was,
kindness, and they don't cost anything, and
yeah.
and um and they help because guess what? You're going to be a, I don't want to cuss on here, but like a jerk off or something one of these times, and like you might need that grace also to keep in mind. And so,
Yes.
we all struggle at different times in different areas, and it takes an entire community and village
Yeah.
to help.
Kindness is contagious for sure. I agree with that. Well, where can people find your services? What is your website?
So it's optimahealing.com. And then obviously my number is available to anybody. That's 702-472-6248. And do not be afraid to reach out. I mean, I do anything from getting families together, going out and finding people, doing interventions. And then whether it's my program or getting them in another program, and that's nationwide. My network is nationwide. So, just reach out and call. Don't be afraid to call.
Beautiful. Yeah. What a beautiful calling that you have found, and, being able to wake up every day and help other people. And I heard the saying, which was by a musician, and he said, when you learn how to turn your pain into light, that's when you found your superpower. And you no longer fear it, but you invite it. And I absolutely loved that. So thank you so much again for being on. And for anybody who's looking for his services, please reach out to him, because your life does matter. You matter. We care about you and love you. Jesus loves you. And there are resources out there. So don't hesitate to reach out, even if it's just for information. And, he's there with open arms to help you.
And thank you, Monica. And thank you for everything you do. It's a big deal.
Mhm.
We need more people like you
Yeah, just
sharing.
spreading love and light.
Yeah, I love it. I love it.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you. Bye.